Good morning, dear colleagues. I am João Bica from the University of Coimbra, and together with Freshley from the University of Gent, we are going to present to you some preliminary results on stakeholder views on relative importance of sustainability objectives for the EU beekeeping sector. That, as you know, is part of WP4 research. I will begin with the introduction, followed by our methodology. Then I will talk to you about the sustainability objectives, after which Dana will take over, describing our exploratory results, the future analysis, and the discussion. Sustainable beekeeping involves an ecological balance between healthy bees and the environment, while also safeguarding economic and social viability. Prevailing solutions have not fully reconciled the multiple aspects of sustainability, that is economic, social, and environmental, and have often traded them off against each other. We want to take a more harmonized approach to sustainable beekeeping. The understanding of what sustainable practices are is contextual by nature and highly dependent on the agent's multiple interests and points of view. In this study, stakeholders that represent the EU beekeeping sector have an opportunity to define healthy and sustainable beekeeping practices and pathways to achieve them in their future policy framework. The importance of consulting with stakeholders is enhanced with the core intention of BeeGood, which is to fully engage stakeholder partnerships and networks in the co-creation of solutions. By means of a survey, the objective is to identify different stakeholder preferences for healthy and sustainable objectives and pathways. Stakeholder preferences can be channeled into two main different factors. The what, being preferences for objectives on what is more important to aim for, and the how, being preferences for viable measures to reach those objectives. Now on to our methodological approach. The method we used is called an analytical hierarchical process, or AHP for short. We use it to identify relevant criteria, arranging them into hierarchies, and then conducting pairwise comparisons to assign relative importance or prioritization. Here we have an example of what it looks like in the survey. In this example, we are asked to choose which fruit we like better. The fruit represents our objectives or our pathways to attain those objectives. Let's say that in this example, the respondent chose the bananas as a preference, after which he ranked this choice as a 7. This allows us to calculate levels of prioritization between the previous choice. In this next example, we have more choices of fruit, making the attribution of numerical values to relative importance or prioritization even more important. As you can see, bananas scored the higher preference, followed by cherries and lastly apples. The numerical ranking shows us that the difference between apples and cherries is smaller than between either of these with the bananas. Thus, this method allows us to meaningfully categorize presented choices in hierarchies of relative importance, creating in this way a manner in which we can understand priorities and to some extent the mindset of stakeholder relative to certain issues. Now I will talk to you about the objectives and pathways that were evaluated using the previously described methodology. These are the main objectives of the what that I mentioned before, being preferences for objectives reflecting on what is more important to aim for. We aim at getting the stakeholder preferences between these main objectives: improve the ecological, social, and economic status of beekeeping in the EU. The main objectives are then divided into several pathways that might allow their achievement, relating to the how, being preferences for viable measures for healthy and sustainable beekeeping management for reaching their objectives. This subdivision into pathways was made during the analysis of the 41 interviews with stakeholders that we did last year. They themselves identified relevant options for healthy and sustainable beekeeping management. These general and specific options were then arranged into hierarchy. Here you can see the arrangement for improved ecological status. Then divided into reduced impacts of pesticides and improved biodiversity, minor objectives that are themselves subdivided into pathways that will allow us to achieve them. Over here you can see the same for improved social status, that was divided only to one minor objective, improved social interactions and knowledge transfer. And improved economic status. That was further subdivided into limit negative impacts of global trade, improved consumer awareness of quality and value of bee products, and improved hive management. Now we'll go on to the exploratory results presented by my colleague Dana Freshley.
Thank you, João. So the target for this study was to attain 200 completed surveys, selecting respondents based on the following criteria. So we wanted to have at least 20 respondents belonging to each of the 8 stakeholder categories. And we also wanted respondents located in the North, South, East, and West regions of Europe. So a big thanks to our Be Good partners in identifying relevant stakeholders, because we received 504 responses from stakeholders in 15 countries. So our Be Good partners were extremely helpful in identifying contacts within their own countries. This map shows the countries from which we received stakeholder responses. The number in each country in the map is how many stakeholders completed the survey in that country. And the darker blue countries mean the more amount of stakeholder responses that we received. Stakeholders represented 8 primary stakeholder categories, with beekeepers being the most represented. So as you can see, this is a distribution of respondents by stakeholder category, and as you can see, beekeepers make up about half of the total respondents. So in order to familiarize ourselves with the AHP analysis, we decided to start analyzing preferences from a subset of beekeepers from the overall dataset to explore differences between hobby and professional beekeepers. So we wanted to get a feel for what the AHP analysis can tell us. So the results so far are from a subset of 153 beekeepers. So here shows their relative importance for improved ecological status. So as you can see, overall, beekeepers showed a strong preference for increased agricultural crop diversification, permanent grassland and pollinator-friendly field hedges, and a very weak preference for stricter regulation on bee breed exchange. So here shows the relative importance for options for improved social status. So overall, beekeepers showed a strong preference for improved communication and cooperation between farmers and beekeepers, and improved transfer of scientific knowledge to beekeeping practice. These were their top 2, and they had less of a preference for increased effort to provide standard veterinary practices. So here shows the relative importance for options for improved economic status. So overall, beekeepers showed a strong preference for improved quality control of bee products, so testing for adulteration and contaminants. And they showed least of a preference for stricter regulations on beekeeper and beehive registrations. So the highest differences in preferences between hobby and professional beekeepers were in the economic section. So for the ecological and social sections, the opinions between hobby and professionals were more or less the same, and this was the only section where the priority rankings between these two groups differ. So hobbyists had improved quality control of bee products as their highest priority, while professionals had increased promotion of beekeeping as a valued service as their highest priority. So we ran statistical tests on the differences between hobby and professionals in this section, and only improved labeling of bee products and increased promotion of beekeeping as a valued service had a statistically significant difference between hobby and professionals. The others so far are tendential differences, and after we examine the entire sample, we might have further findings on this. Here shows the difference between hobbyists and professionals in improved labeling of bee products. So as you can see, professionals showed a stronger preference for the improved labeling of bee products. Perhaps this is because professionals deal more with quantity and competition, which is why they might prioritize the labeling regulations. Here shows the difference in opinion between hobbyists and professionals on increased promotion of beekeeping as a valued service. So professionals showed a stronger preference for the promotion of beekeeping as a valued service, perhaps because they make a living from beekeeping and promoting their activity is of great importance in that regard. Here shows the difference in opinion for improved quality control of bee products. As you can see, hobbyists showed a stronger preference for improved quality control of bee products, testing for adulteration and contaminants. Here we want to show the difference in opinion for increased use of hive monitoring technology because it's a very important element for bee good. The difference is minimal between hobby and professionals, and they both seem to not view it as a high priority. However, hobbyists showed a slightly stronger preference for the increased use of hive monitoring technology. While opinions from both professional and hobby beekeepers are overall very similar in all the sections, they do show tendencies of difference in opinion, and this might be more noticeable after we analyze our entire sample. So in the coming weeks, the remaining 351 stakeholders will be analyzed, taking into account also the remaining stakeholder groups, so service provision, quality inspection, policy making, agriculture, NGO, and commercial interests. So this will allow further analysis into the differences in priorities between the stakeholder groups, within the stakeholder groups, and also between and within different countries and regions throughout Europe. So as we're in the exploratory phase of our analysis, we want your help and we encourage the audience to kick off our analysis. So we have some questions for the audience. The first one is, why do you think hobbyists showed a stronger preference for improved quality control of bee products? The second question is, why do you think professionals showed a stronger preference for improved labeling of bee products? And the third question is, why do you think hobbyists showed a stronger preference for the increased use of hive monitoring technology?